The Rings of Power Season 2 introduces new hobbits. And if you don't know, the Stoors, so before the hobbits became the hobbits and before they ended up in the Shire, there was the Harfoots, which we saw in the Rings of Power Season 1. There were the Falahides, which was another species of hobbit. They actually were a bit taller and they actually wore shoes, but they still had big hairy feet. And then they have the Stoors, which is another race. Over time, there's migration across the Misty Mountains. Certain clans would leave, they'd separate, they'd come together, they ended up in Bree, then they ended up in the Shire, and then over time intermingled and became kind of the blanket term of hobbit. But before they were hobbits, there was clans of their species, 3 clans, the Stoors, the Harfoots, and the Falahides. And essentially, the Falahides and the Harfoots have the most crossover into the realm of the Shire, right? But the Stoors are kind of the ones that crossed the Misty Mountains, or they didn't quite, some crossed the Misty Mountains through a pretty dangerous path. And then some kind of traveled back, and then there was this weird migration. They separated. They're all over the place. And so the Stoors' migration history is a bit all over the place. It's a bit wonky, right? So going through this article, they're basically letting us know that season 2 of The Rings of Power is going to introduce Stoors. So the Harfoots, I guess, Nori, what is her name? Nori Brandyfoot and Poppy Proudfellow, the female versions of Sam and Frodo, are going to come across in the desert land of Rohan, going to come across a little tribe of Stoors, which are also hobbits. But let's go ahead and read through some of this. There's still no hobbits in Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, since the show is set in the second age of Middle-earth. The lovable Shire dwellers we know so well from J.R.R. Tolkien's original stories. So yes, in the lore of Middle-earth, there are no hobbits of any kind or any telling. There is no indication. There is nothing written in the history of Middle-earth about hobbits until around the time of 1000 of the Third Age, right? That's very interesting to me because this means what they're insinuating in the Rings of Power, we're in the Second Age. I'm not even entirely sure what year of the Second Age, because all of their plot points where they like try to make it like the book, and then they make up a whole bunch of stuff, and then they try to do another nod to the books or the lore, and then they make a whole bunch of other stuff. Everything's out of order. Everything is out of order. And one of the biggest things is the fact that they're bringing in hobbits in the first season during the Second Age, when there's no telling of the hobbits in any recorded history, including the elves, who have been around the longest. They are the first children of Iluvatar, and they don't have anything written about the hobbits. There was nothing written about the hobbits until like around 1000 of the Third Age. So we're talking about thousands of years before hobbits are even on the scene. And when they come on the scene in the Third Age, they're still the Harfoots and the Falahides and the Stoors, right? They're on the scene in 1000 of the Third Age in the history of Middle-earth as these different clans. However, like they don't become hobbits till much later. But however, they're bringing them into the Second Age and saying that they play a big part, right? And I know there's this not Gandalf character where they haven't confirmed that it's Gandalf yet. I'm pretty sure they're going to do that in season 2. I don't think he's going to be a blue wizard. Pretty sure he's Gandalf. They pretty much all but said it in the first season. And the reason they didn't say it in the first season is because they didn't have the rights to Gandalf and Saruman and Radagast and the 2 blue wizards. They didn't have the rights to them. The show, Amazon, didn't have the rights to those characters, I believe, until now. I believe they got the rights to those characters, so they can pretty much say it's Gandalf now. But they pretty much said it in the first season, and they're basically trying to set up this backstory to Gandalf. Like, the reason he likes hobbits so much is not because he found them in the Shire or he found them in Brief. He found them through his travels around Middle Earth. It was rather that they basically took him when he landed through a meteor in Middle Earth, and he was like a baby mentally, which is nuts to me. I don't know. There's so much about the lore of Middle Earth that I'm aware of, and the story just twists it. Like, yes, Gandalf was sent to Middle Earth by the Valar to be sort of a prophet, to turn the hearts away from, Saruman and whatnot. Sauron. Turn the hearts of Middle Earth away from Sauron so that not everyone's corrupted, right? And yet they twist it by being like, well, they just sent him in a meteor, and when he woke up, he was like a baby. He didn't know how to talk. Whereas like in the books, it's pretty much implied that he gets to Middle Earth, he knows his purpose, and they sent him. They took the appearance of old men, right? And so it's just they twist it in so many weird ways, and then the timeline is way off with everything. It just feels disrespectful in the same way that the Acolyte is disrespectful to Star Wars lore. This is disrespectful to Tolkien fans and the extensive lore of Middle Earth. People don't even know. That's what's crazy to me. Is like people are acting like they're excited for this show. People don't even know, for some reason, that there's extensive lore to Middle Earth. Tolkien wrote it down for a reason, because he intended it to be played out in this manner. He intended it to be he started all the way back to a god figure with angels. His name was Egu, right? Some people call him Iluvatar. That's why elves and humans are called the children of Iluvatar. It started all the way back then, to the creation of Middle Earth, to the creation of Valinor, to the creation of everything. And all of the different angels that, like the Morgoth, angel that was like the Satan angel. And there's so much history here. So to basically throw the timeline off, to add a bunch of characters, to add a bunch of events that didn't happen, like Sauron pretending to be human and having a weird like sexual tension thing, like we're kind of into each other with Galadriel. No, that's not in the history. That's not even close. Galadriel didn't even have very many run-ins with Sauron at all, because she wasn't there. She was off being a queen. She was off being Galadriel, right? Not partaking in the wars. She did partake in an early war with, I believe, the uprising against Morgoth. But when it came to Sauron, she pretty much was hands off. When it come to actually being in warfare, yeah, no, she was queen, man. She was a lady. She had a husband and a kid, and her daughter married Elrond. We'll see if they even bring that into the story at all. That'd be crazy. But they haven't even brought in her husband. I guess she's not even married, because she was kind of vibing with Sauron. Anyway, so going back to the Stoors, they're bringing Stoors into the picture. And so basically, Nori and Poppy are going to run into this community of Stoors off into the, in the deserts of Ruin, right? And what's interesting is this article talks about, how, let's see how they describe it. But over the years, we as a group have settled, and that has become our culture. We look after one another. And they keep repeating, like the actor who plays, I believe her name is Taina Mundi, playing a Stoor leader, the leader of this little group, this community. She's playing this character, and she keeps saying that, like, oh, our focus is that we look after each other. We're not nomadic. We don't travel around like some of the Harfoots do. We stay in one area, right? And I'm just thinking, like, I wonder how that's going to jive well with, Nori and Poppy, because her clan of the Harfoots, if we remember from season one, it's like, oh, you fall behind, you get left behind. That was their motto. I mean, they were so quick to just be like, abandon them. If they can't keep up, abandon them, right? Another fun fact about the Stoors is that they are the lineage of hobbits that Smeagol comes from. So Smeagol is a descendant of the Stoor clan. And one thing about the Stoors is that they do migrate eventually into kind of like the swampy area, because Stoors grow to love fishing and swimming, which the other hobbits aren't really as into, which is why Sam didn't know how to swim at all, right? But it also explains why Smeagol and Deagle found the ring while they were out fishing, because they were Stoors, and they're like the only hobbit species clan branch off that actually likes water. And but what's crazy to me is that they're bringing it. There's the history of the Stoors is that they got separated. They went around. They kind of wandered. They didn't stay together as much as the Falahides and the Harfoots did. But one thing that's standing out to me is that they're like, oh, we're doing a desert thing before we do a swampland thing. And so that's kind of interesting. We're going to have them in a desert of Middle Earth, in the realm of Rohan. That is interesting because we've never seen it before. How did they put it? So Patrick McKay and JD Payne told Entertainment Weekly they were excited to tell a Lord of the Rings story in the desert for the first time, right? So everything's about the first time here. It's the first female dwarf, which isn't correct. It's the first, maybe one we've seen at length, but it's not the first time. The Hobbit showed them. And it's always the first, right? It's they just really getting off on this idea of we're the first to show it. And so for some reason, that's also on the list. We're going to see Stoors in the desert, which is like a complete contradiction to the fact that they eventually like waterlands. And they bring that up in this article, that they eventually, migrate into the swampy waterlands. And so on some level, they get there eventually. I'm glad they acknowledge it, but I don't know why they're just going with the desert thing. That doesn't necessarily make sense. So, but they're doing it. They're bringing them in. And I wouldn't have a problem with this to say, okay, let's dive into the Stoors a little bit. Yeah, they didn't really mingle. Stoors and the Falahides and the Harfoots didn't really mingle that much. The Falahides and the Harfoots did when they got closer to the Shire, but that's not really a part of the history. Whatever, if there was two that branched off and went on their separate adventure away from everybody, whatever, that's fine. They can run into the Stoors. I just don't understand why we're telling a Hobbit story at all, except for the fact that they're just trying to make this as reminiscent of the Peter Jackson films as possible. Because this is thousands of years before there's any recorded history of the Hobbits. I said this in season one. I'm going to say it again because they're introducing more Hobbits here. You should back off on the Hobbits thing and work harder on getting your elves and men history correct. And Sauron and orcs and everybody. All the history is thrown off. The timeline, the characters, everything's thrown off with this story. And the biggest offender is just the fact of showing things like hobbits, Harfoot Stoors or whatever, when they aren't even in recorded history for Middle Earth until thousands of years later after the events of the Second Age. That's crazy to me that they would even have the audacity to do something like this. So we'll see what comes of this. I don't know if the season is going to... It's interesting that they made the leader and the pictures here. They're... Again, I don't have a problem with mingling the races of characters. I actually didn't have a problem at all with the fact that the Harfoots, there's a handful of darker skinned characters in the Harfoot clan in season one, because Tolkien wrote that the Harfoot clan, specifically the Harfoot clan, has darker complexion in their skin. It's literally there. So I don't know why we're adding it here. If you would say, like, should go harder with the Harfoots if you want, and you should actually make white hobbits for the Stoors and the Falahides, because that's kind of was the intention here, right? So you still get your diversity, but you're also staying correct with the lore. But they're doing it again. They're just throwing in whoever they think fits best, and they're making a woman as the leader of this little Stoor community. There's a lot of black ladies in charge of stuff here, like Numenor, now the Stoors. I don't have a problem with strong black women. Just don't think it's very likely in the history of Middle-earth, especially in places like Numenor. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below.